The grand ballroom of the Riverside Hotel glowed with the warm light of crystal chandeliers, their reflections dancing across tables adorned with white roses and elegant place settings. It was the kind of wedding that appeared in magazines as a perfectly coordinated, flawlessly executed, expensive in that quietly tasteful way that whispered rather than shouted wealth. 32-year-old Claire Anderson sat alone at table 17, positioned near the back of the room where the lighting wasn't quite as flattering and the view of the head table was partially obscured by a decorative column. Her champagne-colored dress was lovely, purchased specifically for her younger sister's wedding, and her blonde hair was swept back in a style that had taken her an hour to perfect that morning. But none of it could disguise the fact that she was conspicuously, painfully alone. Again, Claire watched as her sister Monica glided across the dance floor in her husband's arms, radiant in white silk, surrounded by admiring guests. Their mother stood nearby, dabbing at happy tears with an embroidered handkerchief. Their father beamed with pride, and Claire sat at the table her mother had pointedly designated for singles and miscellaneous guests, which apparently included Claire, two elderly cousins who barely spoke English, and several empty chairs that suggested even the miscellaneous category hadn't wanted to fill them. The rejection stung more than Claire wanted to admit. She and Monica had once been close, only 3 years apart, sharing secrets and dreams throughout their childhood. But somewhere along the way, Monica had become the golden child of the one who'd married well, who'd made the right choices, who'd followed the script their parents had written. Claire had made different choices. She'd focused on her career as a physical therapist, working long hours at a rehabilitation center. She dated, certainly, but never found someone worth building a life with. At 32, she was unmarried, childless, and according to her mother's increasingly pointed comments, letting life pass her by. "Claire, darling, you look lonely over here all by yourself." Her mother's voice cut through her thoughts. Margaret Anderson approached the table with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile at all. "I did try to seat you with family, but with your situation." She trailed off meaningfully. "My situation?" Claire asked, keeping her voice level despite the heat rising in her chest. "Well, being unattached. It's awkward at weddings, isn't it? Everyone paired off. And then there's—" Margaret gestured vaguely at Claire as if she were a piece of furniture that didn't quite fit the decor. Before Claire could respond, her mother had already moved on to greet other guests, leaving Claire with the familiar ache of not being quite enough, of being the disappointment at her own sister's celebration. She was considering slipping out early, claiming a headache, an emergency at work, anything, when she noticed a man approaching her table. He was probably in his mid-30s. With dark hair styled back from his face, wearing an impeccably tailored black tuxedo with a crisp bow tie. There was something kind about his eyes, something genuine in the slight, sympathetic smile he wore as he drew near. "Excuse me," he said quietly, leaning down so only she could hear. "I don't mean to be forward, but I couldn't help noticing you've been sitting alone for a while, and I saw that woman, your mother, say something that seemed to upset you." Claire blinked, surprised. Yes, that's my mother." The man glanced around the ballroom, then back at Claire. "This might sound strange, but I'm in a similar situation tonight. I'm here alone, getting questions I don't want to answer, and I have a feeling you might be too. So here's my proposition. What if we pretend we're together, just for tonight? It might make both our evenings easier." Claire studied him carefully. He didn't seem threatening. If anything, he seemed almost as uncomfortable as she felt. There was something refreshingly honest about his offer, a recognition of the social awkwardness they both faced. "You're serious?" she asked. "Completely. I'm Andrew, by the way, Andrew Mitchell. And before you worry that I'm some kind of creep, I should tell you I'm a single father to a 7-year-old daughter. I'm here because my business partner is the groom's cousin, and he insisted I attend. But being a single dad at a wedding where everyone else seems to be part of a perfect couple," he shrugged. "It gets old fast." Something in his voice resonated with Claire. The weariness of explaining yourself, of defending choices that shouldn't need defending, of being made to feel less than whole simply because you weren't paired off. "I'm Claire," she said, making a decision. "And yes, let's try this. What could it hurt? Andrew's smile was genuine this time as he pulled out the chair beside her and sat down. Almost immediately, the dynamic shifted. Claire was no longer the lonely woman at table 17. She was part of a couple, participating in the wedding rather than just observing it. "So," Andrew said, his voice low and conspiratorial, "what's our story? How did we meet?" Claire felt a small smile tug her lips to the first genuine one of the evening. "Well, what do you do for work?" "I'm an architect. I design commercial buildings, mostly. And I'm a physical therapist." "How about we met when you came in for treatment after a running injury?" "Perfect," Andrew said. "And we've been dating for 6 months, long enough to be serious. Not so long that people ask why we're not engaged yet." Claire agreed. They spent the next hour building their fictional relationship, filling in details with a creativity that surprised them both. With each shared laugh, each improvised answer to curious relatives who suddenly found Claire much more interesting now that she was accompanied by a handsome, successful man, the evening transformed. Andrew was attentive without being overbearing, charming without being false. When Claire's aunt approached to interrogate her about her new boyfriend, Andrew smoothly deflected the nosier questions while providing just enough information to satisfy her curiosity. When dinner was served, they talked easily, discovering that the conversation flowed naturally beyond their fictional backstory. "You're good at this," Claire said as they watched other guests dancing. "So are you," Andrew replied. Then his expression grew more serious. "Can I tell you something honest, please?" My ex-wife left 3 years ago. She said being a mother wasn't what she'd expected, that she felt trapped. So she left me and our daughter, Sophia, just walked away." He paused, staring at his wine glass. "Coming to events like this, I always feel like people are judging me, like I'm half a family, broken somehow." Claire reached out and touched his hand gently. "I understand that feeling. My mother has made it very clear that my life choices are disappointing, that at 32, I should have a husband and children, that my career isn't enough, that I'm not enough." "That's ridiculous," Andrew said with surprising intensity. "You're a physical therapist. You help people recover, regain their lives. That's incredible. And you're raising a daughter on your own while running a business. That's equally incredible." They looked at each other, and something shifted. This wasn't just a convenient fiction anymore. It was two people recognizing each other's worth in a room full of people who'd somehow missed it. The evening continued. When it came time for dancing, Andrew stood and offered his hand. "Shall we make this performance complete?" On the dance floor, surrounded by other couples swaying to the music, Andrew's hand rested lightly on Claire's waist, her hand on his shoulder. They moved together naturally, as if they'd done this before. "Thank you for this," Claire said softly. "I was about to leave early, to hide in my apartment and feel sorry for myself. But you made tonight bearable, more than bearable, actually." "I should be thanking you," Andrew replied. "I was dreading this wedding." "But now," he trailed off, looking at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Claire's mother appeared at the edge of the dance floor, watching them with obvious surprise, and Claire noted with satisfaction a hint of approval. For once, Claire had done something right in Margaret Anderson's eyes, even if it was entirely fictional. But as the evening wore on, as Claire and Andrew continued to talk and laugh and simply enjoy each other's company, Claire began to wonder how much of it was really fiction at all. When the wedding began to wind down, Andrew walked Claire to her car in the parking lot. The night air was cool, a welcome relief after the warmth of the crowded ballroom. "This was nice," Claire said, fishing her keys from her purse. "Thank you for rescuing me." "I think we rescued each other," Andrew replied. Then he hesitated. "Claire, I know we agreed this was just for tonight, just pretend. But would you want to get coffee sometime, for real?" Claire's heart did something complicated in her chest. "Are you asking me on a date, Andrew Mitchell?" "I am. And I should probably mention that any date would eventually involve meeting Sophia, because she's the most important person in my life. Some women can't handle that she comes first as she should come first," Claire interrupted gently. "Your father." "That's how it should be." Andrew's expression softened. "Then yes, I'm asking you on a date, a real one, where we don't have to pretend anything." Claire smiled, genuinely happy for the first time in months. I'd like that very much. They exchanged numbers, and as Claire drove home that night, she found herself thinking not about her mother's judgment or her sister's perfect wedding, but about Andrew's kind eyes and honest conversation, about the possibility of something real emerging from an evening of pretend. Over the following weeks, Claire and Andrew did get coffee, then dinner, then a Sunday afternoon at the park where Claire met Sophia, a bright, funny 7-year-old who showed Claire her collection of rocks and told elaborate stories about each one. Andrew's ex-wife had indeed left a wound, but Claire watched him parent with patience and love, creating a home for his daughter that was full of warmth despite missing a mother. Sophia had been wary at first, protective of her father and fearful of being abandoned again. But Claire didn't rush, didn't try to replace anyone. She simply showed up, was consistent, and let trust build slowly. 6 months after the wedding, Claire invited Andrew and Sophia to her apartment for dinner. As she watched Andrew help Sophia with her homework at the kitchen table while Claire stirred pasta sauce, she felt something settle inside her, a sense of rightness she'd never quite found before. "Claire," Sophia called out, "Dad says you help people learn to walk again after they're hurt. Is that true?" "It is," Claire confirmed, bringing plates to the table. "I help people regain their strength and movement." "That's like a superhero," Sophia said seriously. "My dad builds buildings, but you fix people." "That's way cooler," Claire laughed, catching Andrew's eye. He smiled at her with such warmth that she felt it down to her toes. Later, after Sophia had fallen asleep on the couch during a movie, Andrew and Claire stood in the kitchen, washing dishes side by side. "I need to tell you something," Andrew said quietly. "That night at the wedding, when I approached you, it wasn't entirely spontaneous. I'd noticed you earlier in the evening. I thought you were beautiful, but more than that, you looked genuinely kind. When I saw you sitting alone, looking hurt, I wanted to help, but I also wanted an excuse to talk to you." Clara paused, dish towel in hand. "So it was all a calculated move." "The worst calculated move in history," Andrew admitted. "What kind of person suggests fake dating as a pickup strategy?" "Apparently, the kind who ends up with a real girlfriend 6 months later," Clara said, using the term for the first time. Andrew set down the dish he'd been drying and turned to face her fully. "Is that what you are, my girlfriend?" "Do you want me to be?" "I want you to be much more than that eventually," Andrew said seriously. "But girlfriend is a good place to start." They were married 18 months later, a small ceremony with only close family and friends. Sophia served as flower girl, beaming with pride in her navy dress. Clara's mother attended, still somewhat bewildered by how her disappointing daughter had ended up with such a catch, but gradually coming to respect Clara's choices. But the real magic happened in the quiet moments, in the mornings when Claire helped Sophia practice her multiplication tables while Andrew made pancakes, in the evenings when all three of them curled up on the couch, Sophia between them, reading books together, in the way Andrew looked at Claire when she didn't notice, as if he still couldn't quite believe she was real. On their first anniversary, they returned to the Riverside Hotel for dinner, not in the grand ballroom, but in the intimate restaurant on the ground floor. As they sat across from each other, Andrew reached for Claire's hand. "Do you ever think about that night?" he asked. "About how strange it was that we met?" "All the time," Claire admitted. "I think about how close I came to leaving early, to missing you entirely. About how I almost let my mother's judgment drive me away from what turned out to be the most important evening of my life." "I was terrified to approach you," Andrew confessed. "I thought you'd tell me to get lost, that my offer was absurd." "It was absurd," Claire said with a smile. "But it was also perfect. Because sometimes what we need isn't to be rescued by a prince on a white horse. Sometimes we just need someone to sit with us, to see us as we truly are, and to choose to stay." Andrew raised his glass. "To table 17, to the worst seating assignment that led to the best relationship, to pretending," Claire added, "and to everything that became real." As they touched glasses, Claire thought about the woman she'd been that night, lonely, judged, feeling less than enough, and she thought about who she'd become, a wife, a stepmother, a partner in a relationship built on mutual respect and genuine affection. The truth was, she hadn't needed someone to complete her. She'd been whole all along. But Andrew and Sophia had shown her something important. that being whole on your own and choosing to build a life with others weren't mutually exclusive. They were complementary truths. Sophia was home with a babysitter that evening, probably negotiating an extra half hour of screen time. Tomorrow morning, Claire would help her get ready for school while Andrew made his terrible coffee that they all pretended to enjoy. They'd rush through breakfast, kiss goodbye, and scatter to their separate responsibilities. It was ordinary, beautifully, wonderfully ordinary. And it had all started because a man at a wedding had seen a woman sitting alone and decided that she deserved better. Not because he wanted to save her, but because he recognized in her something familiar, the quiet strength of someone who'd been underestimated, the resilience of someone who'd learned to stand on their own. Sometimes the best love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with simple recognition. Two people seeing each other clearly, choosing kindness, and discovering that pretending to be together can reveal the truth of how well you actually fit. Claire squeezed Andrew's hand across the table, grateful for wedding receptions and awkward seating charts and the courage to say yes to a stranger's unusual proposition. Because some of the best things in life come from the moments when we're brave enough to be vulnerable, open enough to take a chance, and wise enough to recognize possibility when it appears, even if it's wearing a tuxedo and offering an absurd solution to loneliness. Especially then,